reimagining teaching qualifications. Now, the first part that I'm going to look at is just explaining, how this will work. If you've been with me before, then I'm going to just talk a lot to try and maximize the opportunity. I'm going to stop at different points for comments, and because we've got a nice niche group today, it's really, really good that we can have more time on the chat. And also, there's going to be a follow-on one-to-one link, which is going to be given at different times from my colleague Blair. And I'm also going to send some video extensions and support for understanding some of the principles afterwards. So why do I feel we know anything about this in terms of reimagining teacher qualifications? Well, just as really base background, we've been training 8,000 teachers in different things, and you're actually going to focus more on this area here today with us in what we're doing, which is the range of many level 3, level 4 and level 5 qualifications, which offer some alternate routes which are suitable for some people. And we've also taken people through QTS in a variety of ways, and that's one of the key things. Now, we've also been selected to deliver a super teaching school program. The link I'll share into the group later, but essentially we're going to be supporting 300 schools to deliver their teacher training. And so what we talk about here is not just theoretical. Wouldn't it be great if it's stuff that we've been doing for a while and we've done for large organisations? So we work with 450 schools around the world currently, and hopefully we'll be doing more and more as time goes by. Now, the focus for today is the second part of this series, and the series is the growing your own. And so we're here in reimagining qualifications, and what we have tomorrow is using innovative technology. So the things that we're going to cover in a range of items. So the first part is really the context and current standards. So we're considerations on teacher training, so we all know where we are. Thinking about the experience, what made me change things. It wasn't because somebody had a great idea, it was because there was a need and we moved on from there. And also to get us thinking about what goals do we have for teachers or people who are going to become teachers. And in the second part of what we're doing, we're going to be looking at the benefit-led training over qualification-led training. Now, I'm going to say something I don't think necessarily are controversial. They're things that I found to be true, but the things hopefully they'll get you thinking. And that is a key thing. What is the benefit of me doing any qualification? What is the benefit of me doing any training? How is it going to be useful for me in my school and context? And I'll be looking at that a lot. So we'll be looking at that context-based training, mentors and mentoring, alternate traditional quals, and something that we need to bear in mind throughout. Like, a lot of people saying this in a post-COVID world, it's going to be different, etc., etc. And there is a reset button being pressed on a lot of things. But a really interesting thing to think about is, how would it ideally be? And that's one of the things that I want to talk to you about, or actually go through with you, or kind of come to in different ways, in different shapes and different formats. How could your teacher training really be if you wanted to take control of it? Now, if you're in a school and you're actually moving along with actually taking people through a skit that you're currently doing, or whether you've got a partnership with a university, always, I'm going to say do what works for you. But there's certain situations and contexts, and I can't talk for every single person, but there's enough schools that I've worked with now where I know that there is actually training need and context needs something that's more nuanced, more pursued towards. So in looking at that, I'm going to start with that as an idea. Different routes and different needs. What do we need? What are we looking at? And what are we trying to get? And one of the first things I want to do is bring your idea to kind of current training routes and ideas. Now, the current phase that we're in, generally each year we need about 30 to 40,000 staff, teachers to join the profession. And to do that, to get the 40,000, we have to train 80,000. And the reason we have to train 80,000 is because most people drop out. Within PGCE routes themselves, you have a 14 to 30% dropout rate depending on where you are in the country, and many after that don't even go on to serve within schools. Some people say it's as high as 4 in 10, but again, you can find different statistics to prove different things. What we do know conversely works is school work-based training. So where we've had people actually in school, learning within school, we find that they have 80% retention after 2 years, which is a massive difference from people starting their PGC routes. But again, it can be pears and oranges or apples and oranges. I'm not 100% sure what the phrase is. But what we do know is there seems to be more indication that people will stick with this than this over a certain period of time. However, this doesn't necessarily mean that one kind of teacher is in a better situation or a better teacher than the other. It just means that they stay in longer. Now, what does make a difference between the quality of teacher, and this has been shown time and time again, is the quality of the mentoring and the support that that person or that trainee teacher receives. The quality of the mentor makes a huge difference. And this is one of the first things that we actually go back and think about in our training. If it was ideally set up, we focus so much in the way that we train currently on delivery, get the information out, get the information out, get the information out, and we spend so much time, effort, and resource on that. If we're to think about it ideally and to think about the way we'd want to do it to, let's say, perfection, but to improve, well, what are we thinking about? What if we put all the focus on training the mentors? What if the mentors were most up to date with all the information? What if the mentors were keenest on technology use? What if the mentors were keenest on being able to give feedback in an appropriate and concise way? Well, all the research so far shows us the main differentiator in the quality of a teacher is the mentor they receive, not whether they did a PGCE, not whether they had a degree, not whether they did a skit, and not whether they had a master's. The main differentiator in that is the mentor, and maybe we've underplayed that a bit. So I think that's just worth putting out there as something that's really, really important. I also want to bring your attention to something, a statistic, which always kind of kicks me in the gut. Now, aside from actually practical training as well, you see here a PGC typically has between 80 and 84 taught hours in the PGC time, and then the rest of it is obviously in service in schools, etc. Now, for Starbucks training, when Starbucks first started, a Starbucks employee had 240 hours of recorded mandatory CPD face-to-face or work-based training that they had to complete. So I know that's quite a unique statistic, but it's just to give you an idea of where we are, what the main differentiator is, because this is obviously going to be what we take into our hands, and then just kind of an idea of how much we actually put into teacher training starting points, and obviously barista starting points according to Starbucks. And that's just something to think about in terms of how we actually start and look and kind of develop from here. So what's going to change post-COVID, and what will we be able to do? Well, the first thing that's going to happen is cost is going to become a much more important factor. If people need to start thinking about the retraining routes, that's going to change. Now, whether it goes up or comes down, it's not for everyone to say. If you look at, say, I'm just going to put here IPGCE. Now, remembering how much the IPGCE used to cost, if I just share my screen with you now, and so I'm just going to jump across to that. And so now you should be able to see my screen. And I go to IPGC, Derby University, and so this would be an online PGCE. The cost of that, I was looking at it earlier and I thought it was actually quite interesting. It's just going to see if it comes up now, but again, you can look at it afterwards. Fees and funding, and here you see now the online PCE is going to cost £2,625. Now, traditionally, the PGCE costs around £9,000. So you're seeing here that costs are going to change. What's this going to mean for you? Also, the access route for what people will be allowed to do certain postgrad qualifications will change as well. I've just had some of the people who we trained initially in our first cohort. They were in a situation where they completed a level 5 qualification, and now certain universities have actually taken them on to do masters, even though they don't have a degree. So the whole landscape is changing, because you have to remember that universities, in one way, shape, or form, they're a business. So they're in a situation in place where they need to encourage not only the academic rigor, but they have to keep the money coming in. And it's going to be very, very difficult for them to do them in a post-COVID world, where they're obviously, you're probably already seeing some of the shock and horror that they have and feel towards the changes that have come about with the post-COVID preparatory situation that they're in, where they have to learn that. So cost is going to become an issue, and there are going to be some innate barriers. Some of the innate barriers are going to be some of the language, the travel reduction. We're going to see change as well in terms of video use, how people are actually going to start doing things with regards to putting out and disseminating information, how many more courses there are going to be. And people are really starting to think they're flipping their CPD now. They're doing teacher training in a way that allows people to support different things. Like one of our partner companies, Osiris, which was one of the biggest face-to-face training companies in the country, is now moving on to a much more webinar and actually flipped model, where people can actually look at videos and understand different videos, and it becomes the training and the support in programs such as OTI, which really, really helps. Well, one of my arguments is, well, if you're doing that for CPD, for your in-service staff, why don't you flip the whole model and start thinking about doing it for people who are going to be learning to train with you? And that way, kind of developing a bit of your own university, a bit of your own skip, doing in a way that you can really, really tailor the learning experience of new staff and developing staff in your school and with your school. And a key point that we actually talk about here, or we look at here, is the idea of punctuating base knowledge rather than continually sharing base knowledge. And what I mean by that more specifically is, if you think about the way in which we do our teacher training at the moment and we share stuff, almost every university or skit in the country is teaching 85% the same stuff. 85% of face-to-face resources and time is probably spent telling exactly the same thing. Why do we know this? Because when we were putting together our own resources, we actually read through 15 different skip providers and 50 different PGC providers from different universities, and employed people from different universities to start putting our package together. And so the majority of things, because it's government mandated, has to be the same. So how does that really help prepare for your context? Well, it doesn't. It's really there for what teacher training is, because the idea isn't context-based. It's supposed to go all around the country. But if you want to start thinking about reimagining your teacher training qualifications, reimagining your recruitment, and reimagining some of the implementation of your training, you as a senior leader or you as a head teacher is going to be able to think about that in a slightly different way. You can personalize and contextualize some of the items that are more important to you, so you can ensure that you're getting the kind of staff that you want. And I'm going to talk more and more about how this became something that was key and pivotal to us in what we were doing. Now, the first of those issues comes from the situation that I was in. Now, I was a head, or it took a situation to be head in a school that was in a situation called being red flagged. Some of the senior leadership were not able to come to school for various reasons, and it was one of the ones that was not expected to do so well, one of the new schools. And in that situation, I obviously, we put out looking for qualified teachers, and we tried to get this and tried to get that. But what we found generally, because our context and our situation wasn't great, qualified teachers didn't want to join us. So a lot of what I'm going to talk to you here, or kind of share with you here, is because of that situation. People did not want to come to a failing school. People did not want to join a failing school. And when we tried to get supply teachers, I laugh now, but it's one of those laugh cry situations. And we employed 3 supply teachers in one day, and they all left on the first day just because of the behaviour of the students and some of the situations that they couldn't deal with. And this was very early on in our journey. So what came about was I decided, right, well, we're going to have to do all the training ourselves because we can't get the staff in. So I used to run an advert on Gumtree, which was available all the time, any time of the night or day, anywhere you went, you would see our advert on Gumtree. And it wasn't a massive, hey, welcome to teaching, skip this and skip that. It was just a case of, do you have passion for a certain subject area, this, that, and the other? Are you willing to work with young people and in a difficult situation help turn around and change lives? If you do, I want to hear from you. And the reason I did this was because I was trying to just find and cast as wide as possible to get people in. And guess what happened? We found people who were interested in becoming a teacher who had degrees, people who didn't have degrees, people who had H&Ds, people who'd been dual professionals in other subjects. And we found a load of different people coming from different walks of life and keeping it nice and open and wide. Now, obviously, as you heard me say there, some people had degrees, some people didn't have degrees. So how did we develop and move with that? I'm going to explain. But the key item was that this was born out of necessity, not from any crusade or some ideas of what we wanted to do or what we wanted to do better. What we were trying to do most clearly and most pivotally was to be in a situation where we actually just had some people who would come and work with us. And so what did we find that actually worked? Well, developing people with their passion and resilience in terms of working with young people. Now, in our school, we did everything differently. So we didn't have a normal job application process where you would fill in a form and then come and have an interview and do a test lesson, because some of these people had never taught before. And what I was promising them was changing or an opportunity to train to teach. And if you had a degree, you could go all the way through to QTS. And if you didn't, you could go through another route, which I'll explain as we go through. And the way that we actually started doing it, and obviously it'll be easier in a much bigger school, is we used to say to them, "You're welcome. You can come. We'll pay for you to do your DBS, so you'll come, and then you have to come and volunteer." Before you actually came and worked at our school, you had to come and volunteer, because some people like the idea of helping children, working with children in difficult circumstances, but not everyone is going to stick with that and do it. And from there, we actually took that as a base, and those that progressed, we started to develop alternative and traditional methods to doing it. And throughout that, in our training experience, all the way through, the 3 key things we used was video sharing of best practice, video feedback on actually staff trying to put best practice into practice, and then video progression by making sure that we tiered and personalized different elements and different routes for different teachers at different times. Now, I want you to just think for a second, and obviously I'll reference again some of our ideas on how we did it, is how we spend time and money on initial teacher training and CPD. And when we think about this, and I've touched upon this slightly in another lecture, but I was talking, webinar, and when we were looking at here, I was last time getting people to think about the different levels and types of training. But what I want you to think about here is actually, well, which vehicle are you using to give ITT or CPD? Are you using the face-to-face at 1-2 regularly? Are you actually using CPD days off-site? Are you using university support? What's the vehicle for conveying that? And I guess my follow-on question is, how can you take that into your hands? The next item that I'd like to bring your attention to is the school need, and then thinking, how regular are you emphasizing repeating the school need? because so much of the training that's done in schools is reactionary, or we're just kind of moving around it. We haven't got it planned. In fact, I think a lot of schools have higher expectation of their staff to deliver to their students in terms of quality progression over a period of time, and it's much more checked than it is of their staff. So again, I ask you the same question: what would it ideally look like if you had some of the time or some of the resources that I'm going to share with you in terms of making that more personalised and relevant to yourself? And then I'll talk about the government need items such as the Prevent framework and things like this that we'll put out, or some of the e-learning safety, which is going to be more and more important, or obviously COVID training, which is going to be hugely important now for COVID-20. What check-ins do you have? How have you set up and actually tailored those items around it? Because you think about it, what normally happens is we'll spend a lot of money on sending one person to a £600 a day or a £500 a day course. We'll spend the money on that, and then we'll think to ourselves, okay, we're in a situation where we're spending money on CPD by actually sending someone out to have a one-day training. And then with the government checking, we're doing the same thing with some AQA updates or something along those lines. And again, that's one day. And when we're having that vehicle for what we're doing here, we're having it basically via INSET. So we have a load of people who are in a situation where we're spending thousands and thousands and thousands of pounds on gathering all the staff into one space one time. So think about those items here, and generally we're doing what we do not because the people in charge are followers or any way. In schools, people are very autonomous. People are very free willed. People do what they think is right for their situation and their context. We're not generally conformists. So why do we do the same thing in all our training? And what I'm going to share with you and show you as well is one of the ways that we try to get through the barriers that we had in terms of keeping things very contextualized and relevant. We started to change and develop and actually augment things in a different way. But obviously I've touched on a few things there, but I want you to get an idea here on the situation that we are post-COVID. Now, you're going to find that a lot of people are going to be looking to capitalize on change. There's a lot of people who had a lifestyle and a change in a way where they think, actually, you know what, I like spending more time at home. I don't want to do the commute. I want to do something more valuable in my life. And what that means is you're going to have more mature learners looking to become teachers. You've also got a situation where people are actually looked at things and said, you know what, in a post-COVID world, I want to be there for my community. I want to support people more. Some of the community togetherness, etc., that's been brought together is tying people in and actually supporting them in a different way. And then lastly here, and I think this is going to be a big change at all as well, with the lack of the travel and the lack of the different ways and opportunities that are there, you find generally that transiency is one of the things that kills teaching continuity. When you have, hotshot teachers or head teachers who are in a situation where they're somewhere for a year or two and then they want to move on, we've got to put things in place to try and stop that. We've got to know that the training and development past ITT within our schools is robust enough to keep people there. And so what we're going to talk about is how we can use some of the new qualifications and obviously some of the new technology or some of the new repositories that are available to build our own training library, to develop our own ITT, and then to develop it in a way that maybe suits and personalizes stuff. And then we can develop and push it beyond that to put in and imprint our own training need and ethos. So really making our ITT contextualized to us and supportive and relevant to the context and the need that we have. Now, you have to say this is a new opportunity. We haven't really had, and we're not going to have had, the caliber of people. There's going to be a lot of people for sad reasons, losing jobs, changing jobs, furloughed, moving out of furlough, wanting to spend more time with their family. We're probably going to have the most ripe or fertile, and I'm going to touch upon this later as well, group of candidates coming through to us in the next couple of years. So it's really, really important to think about the topic that I'm really covering in terms of reimagining our initial teacher training and reimagining the routes that we're allowing people to join us through the teacher training. And so now I'm going to talk about the benefits of context-left training, which is the kind of training, especially the ITT training, that I believe in. Now, in our situation and our context, what we were doing, what was most important was to make sure that people understood working in our context. And our context was what people have referred to in olden times as a crew, in modern times as an AP. And we were trying to shake the stigma away from that. We were trying to help some of the most disadvantaged students who, for one reason or another couldn't access other schools. And so it was critical for us not to try and replicate some of the items and the ideas that came through in schools. And so we had to develop our own ITT and support mechanisms built in and around that. So what we try to do is to look across a wide training playing field for children. Now, if you're not familiar with this, you probably have heard of the Office of Qualifications, which is known as Ofqual, and that is an item that actually helps to match standards across the range. And all qualifications run from a level 2 to, well, sorry, level 1 to a level 8, but level 2 to level 7 are the ones that are most relevant to us. Now, where will you've heard of level 2 qualifications? Level 2 qualification may be something you did in safeguarding. It may be something that you did as well in looking at situations where you were looking at an introductory course to cooking or health and safety. But a level 2 to qualification with regards to teacher training doesn't actually yet apply. It starts at level 3. Now, level 3 is where we do something called the AET, and believe it or not, this is one of the most popular training qualifications in the world, and it's the award in education and training. Now, it's mainly set up to help adults and to help adults kind of train in workplaces so they understand what they're doing. And the basis of it is it kind of goes through the teaching learning cycle and the basis of assessment. Now, remember, this is a level 3 qualification. So a level 3 qualification is basically the same as doing your GCSEs up to level C grade. So we can't say that you're proficient or you have great knowledge or anything that you're doing that kind of way, shape or form. The place and space that you're in is all the way down at level 3. Now, the DET is the diploma in education and training. And again, this is relevant for people that don't have degrees, where you move on to a level 5 qualification, where it becomes a lot more critical in terms of your understanding. It becomes a lot more critical in the way that you actually assess and analyze different things, and you start to engage in research projects. The length of time in them is actually denoted. This one takes at least 1 month, and this one, generally the fastest you can do this one in is 1 year. Now, again, it's based around an adult context. When I say adult, it's 14 and above, but they are far more costly opportunities open to people who don't have the requisite degree and qualification. Now, that's not, again, because we're trying to circumnavigate or to break this down. This is to do with cost. If it costs 30 plus grand to get into a situation where you can develop some of your staff that way, and give them the qualification around it, and it costs you maybe 4, even the other way around, then there's a real consideration there on how and what you might want to do and how you might want to change. And then on top of that, if you don't have a degree, there is the Qualified Teacher in Learning Skills, which is the professional formation equivalent in colleges for QTS. And again, rather than paying £5,000 to £7,000 for QTS, that is something that is recognised. Michael Gove made legally recognised to be imperative in schools where it's relevant as well. So upper secondary and sixth form, where people again had opportunity to do the QTLS to be able to become a qualified teacher. So QTLS has parity in law with QTS. Now, it's not very popular or well known, but it is something that you can have a look at. Blair, if you can throw up some of the links, please, for the QTLS, the AET, and the DET, just in general, just so people get an idea for what might match in their content. Now, just to give you an idea, a typical degree on completion, as you know, is 3 years. And level 1, the work, level 2, the work, level 3, the work. Generally, we're saying here it's going to be level 4, level 5, foundation degree and intro degree. Here, year 2, it's generally going to be level 5, and then year 3, it's going to be level 5, 6. So as you can see, the DET is actually quite comparative in some ways to the majority of a degree. So it is something that's quite meaty to get your teeth stuck into, something that can really help people as an alternative route to actually getting into some of the qualifications and the ideas. Now, going back to these levels of qualifications, that was another area that really bugged me when I was a head teacher. Any qualification that we have or that we do, we have to pay for. And that obviously is very clear what I mean by that. And I'm sure some of the leaders can actually understand, my problem with this. A person comes to you and either we want them to do the training and they're reluctant, or they really insist on doing the training. But either way, we have to pay for it. And so we would pay for this and encourage it. Just think now how many people that you've paid for training for have actually completed it. And I can go back and think in my own mind, it's probably about 60% of the people who I paid for thousands of pounds of training for complete it. And it might be because it was too hard. It might be because they had this situation or that situation. And so much of we put out and we actually try and share and push to people is all to do with them being in a situation where we're investing in them. So they're an investment for us on what we're putting in. But the way we do this when we work with qualifications in our system is you don't pay for any of the qualifications. The staff get all the access to all the qualifications for any subscribed school, and then you only pay a top-up fee to the university or to QTS or to whatever it is after the element is actually completed and they've proven that they can do the thing that you want them to do. So it becomes a much more fluid way of working on it. You're not investing in the right time. And it's really, really important to remember that routes can be right for context. So for some people who have colleges, who have sixth forms, who have staff members who are going to deal with a certain age group, this is going to be perfect. For some people where you are just going to give people the information and access, that's going to be really, really important as well. But you don't have to be in a situation where you're just trying to think, they don't have a degree, they don't have a PGC, we can't use them. You can cast the net wider than that. And we can see that in terms of the way that people are working. Remember, the apprenticeship's coming in, going to be something that's going to be done one way or another anyway. And the question becomes, do we need the knowledge or do we need the qualification? Another point that's actually really, really important is to remember that no degree, well, sometimes you can have what's called a dual professional, someone who's an expert in their field that may have done a HND or done different items that has actually gathered their skills and opportunity that way, and they may be perfect for you. I've got an electrician who was doing some work on our new offices recently, and I was talking to him about this, and he's like, yeah, things are really drying up. I actually want to get into teaching, but I did my HND level 4, level 5, I don't know this, that, and the other. And so I was explaining him to the dual professional route, and he became really, really interested, and he started the AT with us because he wants to start now getting his level 3, getting his level 5, and developing that way. I'm also going to highlight as well that a lot of people that work universities have maybe even private schools, or I'd say at least 30% of people who work in private schools, they have degrees, but they're in a situation where they don't have QTS. So we have this long-standing, historical landmark where people are actually teaching who are unqualified anyway. So it's well worth thinking about. But what you want to bring your attention to is looking at what you know, what you can do, and how you can think in terms of your staff training. And that's how you think about your staff. Like, what do they know? What can they do, and how do they think? Now, a degree really helps you think. A qualification in teacher training also proves something. But what if you had your school's own stamp of approval? I know certain schools and academies actually have their own training programs, they're quite popular within their training groups, and they say, this is us, this is the way we do things. And that's more of a badge of honor for us than a PGCE. It's more of a badge of honor for us than looking at other types of qualifications. So you can think about how you can develop and shape some of the items that you have there, to think about the reward that you're giving teachers at the end of it. The people that are training with you, how you do it. And I remind you again, there's never going to be a better time to cast a wide recruitment net. Now, if you're thinking that you're normally in a situation where you're spending thousands and thousands of pounds on adverts with supply agencies and with the tests and, you're going to find that Facebook ads and Facebook groups in your local community, where you start to build that relationship, you're going to find people who are interested in your community coming back at you. So there's so much more scope to actually say, hey, there's never been a better time for us to look at recruitment of our initial teacher trainers, pre-service teachers in a different way, and we can kind of guide them in our own way. Do you want to start them out as teaching assistants? Do you want to start them out as unqualified in certain ways? Again, depending on the age, the experience, the range of people coming to you, there's no reason now not to be able to do that. You can uncouple yourself confidently, if you want to take full responsibility for it, away from some of the institutions that really used to kind of guide and develop and hold those items for us. And then the items that I think are there then is in your context. When you're setting up your program, or when you're looking at what you want to do, it's really, really important to think about the end, how you want things to finish, who you want on there for you. And so you may think to yourself, well, I want teachers who, and you'll talk about that context. I want loyalty from my teachers because, and again, you'll think about that context. And thinking again, my school and my community link through, and you'll think about your situation and context. So it could be, I want loyalty because our children need X, Y, and Z. I want teachers who are willing to go the extra mile for X, Y, Z. Or it could be the reverse. I want teachers who never have to take homework away with them. And you can see, you can set some of the training and the understanding around it for that purpose. And again, I don't say this to you hypothetically. When I was actually a head teacher and I was looking at this and I was trying to develop my staff, is I want teachers who never have to take the work home. And so we put an extra hour of the day, each and every day, like instead of actually, leaving at 3:15, etc., we were there till at least 4:45 every day, and everyone's planning and understanding, etc., would be done there. So my key thing was I wanted teachers who were willing to do that little bit extra, so they never had to take work home, and it worked for us. I want loyalty because I've invested in you. And that was a big, big thing of what we'd say. You'd get my time, you'd get the deputy head's time, you'd get all these videos, all these instructions. I'm not investing all this money into you, so you can just run off at the first sign of X, Y, and Z. And so I explained that to my staff, and they knew what they were getting into. And thankfully, we never really lost that we wanted to keep at any point, because of the nature of how we were actually developing our training with that in mind. It was known. It was never just kind of application, and it's like a 50-50 flirt and a date to see who gets what out of what. It's really, really important. And this last one here is probably the part that I'm most proudest of. The way that we trained up to your staff was to make sure that we reacted and supported students who had difficult times in any way, shape or form. And sometimes that meant wild things for us. So we would sometimes turn on lessons where teachers would support a visiting actor or a visiting comedian or a visiting rap battle artist to keep our students engaged. And they used to have to know in our training exactly how to work with guests and people coming in. But more importantly, it was actually to show that these students can be members of society. One of the proudest things we did in our school was actually open a shop in the local shopping centre where our staff made stuff in school that would be sold to the public by students in our actual own shop. And it wasn't open for everyone, obviously, but it was a reward, it was a treat, it was linking back to our community. And we did the same with the coffee shop. But the coffee shop, we were just selling cakes because of the health and hygiene and stuff. We couldn't do it as much as we did the shop because of working with boiling equipment, etc., etc. In the cafes, we always had to have an adult there, so it wasn't student led. But again, it's something that was really, really relevant and important. So you think about your context, you think about your training, you think about reimagining the use of qualifications. You don't have to stick to the tried and tested path. And remember, even if you try this, the only way that you start trialing it and developing it, it will cost you next to nothing to start thinking about. Because of the way that you're able to access the information or able to use some of your own inexperienced training, being able to advertise to this wide net of people who may be more interested in teaching after COVID is going to be really, really important, where you can actually touch upon and lead with different kind of instances and understandings of how people may start to develop their teacher training routes, teaching careers, etc., etc., etc. That's the end of the presentation today. Thank you very much for joining.